Good evening. I am Scott Carlton, Artistic Director of Singers Programs of the Wagner Society of New York, and I welcome you to this evening's program on Wagner's third opera, Rienzi, or Rienzi, the Last of the Tribunes. We are here specifically to recognize and honor Maestro Eve Queller and her performances of the work. These performances were a highlight of the New York concert season and are still talked about to this day. The preceding musical excerpt was from Maestro Queller's 2012 performance of Rienzi at the then Avery Fisher Hall. Rienzi was Wagner's third completed opera after Die Feen and Das Liebesverbot, and like these two, Rienzi is seldom performed apart from the overture, which has made its way onto the concert stage and has become a repertory staple. Aside from the opera's inordinate length, over 5 hours in its original form, the work requires huge forces, including offstage brass bands, multiple choruses, and taxing principal roles. Wagner himself recognized the unwieldiness of Rienzi and subjected it to multiple cuts and reductions after the premiere of the opera on October 20th, 1842 in Dresden. The premiere performance was in fact an immediate success, the first real success of any kind in Wagner's career, and it launched him as a composer to be taken seriously. Nonetheless, in his later years, he is recorded by Cosima in her diary as having said, "Rienzi is very repugnant to me, but they should at least recognize the fire in it." Musically and formally, Rienzi is very much indebted to Spontini, Aubert, and above all, Meyerbeer, who championed the work and was instrumental in bringing about the premiere of the opera. Of Wagner's musical and formal debt to Meyerbeer, it was famously said by Hans von Bülow that Rienzi is Meyerbeer's best opera, while Charles Rosen maintained that it is Meyerbeer's worst opera. Ernest Newman called it an attack of musical measles, while Mahler named it the greatest musical drama ever composed. We can see that the ever controversial Wagner divided his critics in both his early and later works. Rienzi is set in Rome and is based on the life of Cola di Rienzi, the last of the Roman tribunes. It has its basis in the novel by Edward Bulwer Lytton and in the stage play Rienzi by Mary Russell Mitford. This latter play had its premiere in 1828 and was hugely popular in its time. We are indebted to Bulwer Lytton for the phrases, "The pen is mightier than the sword," "The great unwashed," and "It was a dark and stormy night." The historical figure Cola di Rienzi was in real life a man born of humble parentage, but who claimed royal ancestry. He dreamed of returning Rome to its ancient greatness and was supported in this by the poet Petrarch. After a failed attempt to put down the noble Orsini and Colonna families, he abdicated his role, he was imprisoned, was pardoned by Pope Innocent VI, but lastly lost the favor of the people and was murdered by a mob. He was, as described by Adrian Littleton, the last romantic stereotype of an inspired dreamer who foresees the national future. The figure of Rienzi was adopted as an inspiration to the nationalist movements of the 1840s and became an historical figurehead of the Italian Risorgimento. The dramatic plot of Rienzi is not easily summarized, but at its core is the struggle between the patrician houses of Orsini and Colonna on the one hand and Rienzi on the other to wield power over the Roman state, a power which Rienzi first attains and then rejects. The opera opens with a kidnap attempt on Rienzi's sister Irene, which is foiled. And Act 1 includes a beautiful love duet, which you will hear later, between Irene and Rienzi's son Adriano. Act 2 includes a ballet on the theme of the rape of Lucretia, which was included to satisfy the demands of the Parisian public before whom Wagner wanted to present Rienzi. The ballet is heavily cut in modern performances. After political machinations involving the Pope and the Emperor of Germany, a papal ban on Rienzi and threat of his excommunication, Rienzi attempts to speak to the crowd in the last scene of the opera and is met with stones and insults. He takes refuge in the Roman capital with Adriano and Irene. The building is set afire, and the three die in the resulting conflagration. Despite its length, Rienzi has a rich performance history and was hugely popular in the 19th century, both in Europe and in America. It is important to note the singer Wilhelmina Schröder-Devrient, who premiered the trouser role of Rienzi's son Adriano and who exerted a powerful impression on Wagner with her uncommon combination of fine quality of tone and dramatic expression. In addition to Adriano, she created the roles of Zenta and of Venus in Tannhäuser. We will speak at greater length about the difficulty of casting the principal roles of Rienzi and managing its huge proportions with our guest, Maestro Eve Queller, whom I'm pleased to welcome now. Maestro Queller, it's so nice to have you with us today.
Thank you. Nice
you know, you've had a very long and illustrious career as a conductor, and the Cleveland Press wrote that you know where to find the choice goodies in the giant operatic cookie jar. And I would say that Rienzi is certainly one of the choice goodies in the cookie jar. Coming more generally to Wagner, let's say, you wrote in your book that Wagner, my life was dominated by Wagner. Could you perhaps elaborate on that?
Yes, I went to the High School of Music and Art, which is it was up on 135th Street and Convent Avenue. When Lincoln Center opened, it moved down to Lincoln Center, and they also added to music and art, they added drama and dance. In order to get into the school, I auditioned as a pianist, and all the pianists were reassigned orchestral instruments so that the school could fill up its 6 symphony orchestras. I was assigned, and I loved the French horn, and it became my favorite instrument, probably. And our graduation march was the overture to Die Meistersinger, to Wagner's Die Meistersinger. It's a lot to play. And I played second horn in the orchestra, which means that my part was not the top part, not as high as the first horn, but it was high. And after we finished playing the overture, I thought to myself, how does anybody play the rest of the opera? I couldn't, my lips were just not ready to do anything except go down. So my introduction to Wagner, the students at the little block that you form with friends in high school, we went often to the Met, and we chose always Wagner. We were lucky to get score desks where we could watch the score on the 5th floor, or we could get standing passes, and we always chose the Wagner operas. We stood through all the long 5-hour operas, which you didn't even know you were standing. They were so wonderful. Anyway, fast forward a couple of decades. The University of Maryland decided to inaugurate a summer program for orchestra instrumentalists to learn how to play opera. Most of the programs in the schools also were symphony. They didn't play opera, which is probably a good idea because they probably didn't have singers who could sing operas at that age group.
Yes.
So the University of Maryland decided to start a summer program for learning how to play opera, and they asked me to be the conductor and to select the musicians. I went all over the United States auditioning and picked out about 80 instrumentalists who they had to pay their own way, but then they had room and board when they got there, and they were very nicely nurtured and looked after. And the main project was an uncut Tristan and Isolde with Roberta Knie and Jess Thomas at the end of the 4-week period. And to say it uncut, Jess Thomas had never sung the Tage Nacht scene in the second act, and of course, because it had to be uncut, he had to learn it. But it was an interesting project, and for me, it was my first Tristan. It was a big success, such a success that people suggested that I add it to my opera orchestra series in Carnegie Hall the following New Year's Eve. And we brought together again a cast for Tristan. The same singers couldn't make it, but we brought some other singers in. We did a Tristan on New Year's Eve in Carnegie Hall. We started at 7 at night and we ended at midnight. And so that was
that's quite a way to ring in the new year, isn't it?
It was a big thrill.
You know, I wonder because you know the scale of the two works, the Tristan and the Rienzi, they're both huge operas. Perhaps you could let us know what attracted you to Rienzi, what really in particular drew you to that opera.
Well, I wanted to do Wagner, and I certainly couldn't consider doing any of the main operas that are in the Met. It had to be something, one of his unusual operas. And so there wasn't really that big a choice to choose something that nobody knew and that I really loved it. So that's how Rienzi came up.
I see, yes. Now, having conducted both of them, you made a recording of Tristan and you did performances of it, and you've done many performances of Rienzi. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges? What are the challenges of conducting Rienzi as opposed to conducting Tristan?
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be that different, but there are more choruses in Rienzi. There are we used to have 4 different choruses, and because of what the choruses are doing, it became a focus of my performances that we had children for the messages of peace, and we had soldiers from the army when we could get them. We collaborated, and then there's the regular chorus that's on the stage all the time that sings in the big ensembles, and so that's something that doesn't exist in the other Wagner operas, as far as I know.
As far as the physical demands on you as a conductor, are they similar or are they different with the different musical demands?
Well, I mean, it's just a lot of energy and a lot of rhythmic pieces in Rienzi. A lot of marches and a lot of stage bands and placed everywhere. And I put the bands everywhere because I wanted the audience, although we are not staging it, I wanted the audience to feel like there's something live really happening. And a lot of the plans sometimes were waylaid because, you're not allowed to open that door during the performance. Well, but the band is going to be out there. Could you just give you a signal and just open it? And then sometimes you had to have a policeman standing by. Sometimes you had a policeman standing by backstage, some people up in the balcony that, when you put music stands and trombones and there are people sitting right there, you might have to have somebody else.
Yeah.
So there was all of this to try to figure out.
A lot of logistical demands then.
Logistical demands, but
yeah.
It really made people feel part of it. The audience was very excited.
Now I wonder, as you say, Rienzi is full of choruses and marches and a great deal of music, and some people seem to feel that the only thing worthwhile in Rienzi is the overture and maybe the Rienzi prayer. But as we know, there's a lot of great music in Rienzi. And I wonder how you decided on what cuts to make. Did you use a performing edition or did you make your own cuts?
I didn't use an edition. I don't know if there is one, but when I looked at cuts, when you look at cuts, the first thing you have to do is say, what can't be cut? What must not be cut? And so I went through the score and I said, oh, no, this can't be cut. No, this can't, no, this couldn't possibly be cut. This couldn't possibly be cut. So can only cut what's in between what I said I couldn't possibly cut it. And then, so it's probably a lot of ensembles and maybe big scenes, repeating, repetition.
Yes, yes. And I understand the ballet is often cut very heavily.
I would understand why.
Right, right.
Yeah, I didn't do the ballet.
I see, I see. Of course, that was included to keep the people in Paris happy when it was written, to have a big second act ballet so they could all come and see their favorite dancers, as we know.
Well, it also, making those cuts, it can make it more difficult for the singers, especially for the Rienzi, if his rest period is condensed even further.
I see, yes. You know, as we say, there are so many components to Rienzi and such really, frankly, really great music. Do you have particular parts of the score that are favorites of yours?
Oh, I have so many. As I say, when I'm listening to the overture, that's my favorite. When it plays the prayer, Rienzi's prayer, and it's so beautiful, and it plays some other, let's get up and fight, and then what I like about what I feel is really something personal about the Rienzi is that the principal romantic characters are two women's voices. As I say, he couldn't make the lover a tenor because Rienzi is a tenor, and so in order to do that, he made the lover, the male lover, is actually a woman singer, a mezzo soprano. I like the duets that they can have, which is a wonderful duet together.
Yes, that's a perfect lead into our next segment, which is in fact the duet. We have a duet. This is, as Eve said, the Irene Adriano duet, and Adriano is a trouser role sung by a mezzo soprano. In this duet, which we'll hear shortly, the two realize their mutual attraction and sing Ja, eine Welt voll Leiden, yes, a world full of sorrows. We were going to hear a performance conducted by Maestro Queller at Carnegie Hall in 1992 with soprano Monica Pic-Hieronymi as Irene and mezzo-soprano Sharon Graham as Adriano. Let's have a listen. we just heard the Irene Adriano duet, and it is indeed beautiful. Let's turn from the solo roles to the chorus. We were talking about the numerous choruses and the difficulties of managing them. Can you tell us a bit about the logistics of conducting forces of that size? The choruses, as you said, you wanted the audience to be involved. It must be a challenge, especially in a hall like Fisher Hall, to keep everything together. How did you do that?
Well, the Messengers of Peace, which I think was all a children's chorus, the Messengers of Peace sing the beginning of their part. They sing it entering the hall from the rear of the hall. They don't sing it from the stage, and they process slowly down the aisle. Down the aisle, I think on my right. And it starts out a cappella. Fortunately, they start on the right key, and then they come down the aisle and progress behind me in front of the stage because there was no room for them on the stage. And they finish singing with the orchestra accompanying them. They finish singing their Messenger of Peace. And then there is a Messenger of Peace soloist who sings from the stage. And then they start to sing again as they slowly march out. They don't march, actually, they're walking, or two-step, whatever. And as they're progressing out, of course, the voices get softer and softer. Not that they're singing softer and softer, but there's less and less and less. And so we get this feeling of they come, they're with us, they sing freedom, and then they go back and they sing of peace, and then they go back and they disappear, and then we make another racket of starting a war again or whatever than that. That's the Messages of Peace. And I have the chorus on stage, who are the people. And then we had a soldiers chorus, Alf, I think, and they also marched in, sang, and marched out again. So again, it gives the audience some kind of a sense that you have to look around. You don't know what's happening at all.
Yes.
And I think at one point we did have West Point cadets or Army using swords as they. I couldn't see this, of course, because I have my back on conducting, but I understand they were brandishing swords, and there was some comment in the press about this.
Yes, I think a rather well-known music critic claims he was almost nailed by a sword.
Beheaded, yeah.
Beheaded, yes. Is it difficult to keep acoustically forces like that together? I mean, how do you manage to keep them all on the beat?
Well, sometimes there can be this second lull, wait, that I might have to wait for on the stage, somehow fudge it together. We didn't have too much problem. The only time I had problem with the banda was when they wouldn't open the doors, and it was very hard for us to hear each other.
I should mention for our audience that banda is an Italian word that means band or group, and it means the group that's an offstage or perhaps on-stage orchestra or brass band.
A separate brass, usually trumpets and trombones. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And how about working with the children? Were they easy to work with in this scene?
Well, they come from the special music school, those particular children, and they were beautifully prepared and beautifully dressed. I have to say that they memorized the music, and some of it was a cappella, and the teachers and the adults who get involved with this are very dedicated and very very grateful that the children can have this opportunity. Sing in Carnegie Hall with an orchestra. It's big. It's big for all of us. It's good for us that we have these youth, these young people, and hear how clearly they can sing and keep the pitches without any accompaniment. So it's a yes up for everybody.
Yes, I see. Well, this is a perfect moment then to cut to that segment. In the second act, as Eve mentioned, an angelic messenger of peace sung here by soprano Emily Duncan Brown, is joined by an angelic chorus, here the Vox Nova of the Special Music School, Emily John, director. They're joined in an excerpt from the 2012 Avery Fisher Hall performance. In the opera, the chorus messengers of peace consist of the youth of the best Roman families, clad in silk white robes, with wreaths in their hair and silver staves in their hands. The solar messenger of peace sings, "I saw the cities and the countryside. I traversed the seaside as far as the land of the Romans reaches, and I found peace everywhere." So with that, we're going to hear the performance from 2012. Maestro Queller, could you perhaps give us a performance history that you have your traversal of the work, starting in 1980, the where and when of your various performances? I think we'd all find that very interesting.
1980 was the first in Carnegie Hall. The tenor singing Rienzi got sick at the last minute, and his understudy, who was very good, went on, which immediately made me want to repeat it again as soon as possible so that the tenor who was supposed to sing Rienzi could sing Rienzi. And so I did that 2 years later in Avery Fisher Hall. And then once I had the whole package together, we went to Queens College with it. We went to Kennedy Center with it. And then a couple of years passed by. I think in 1992, did it again in Carnegie Hall. And then we went to Princeton, I think, and we had the participation of the Princeton chorus. And the very last performance was, so there should be a total of 7. The last performance was in Avery Fisher Hall, and
right.
7 performances.
That was, I believe, 2012, right?
2012.
Yes, yeah. You know, I know that you gave typically a high-profile performance, let's say in Carnegie or in Fisher, but then you also let your covers, that is the understudies or the second stringers, have their own performance of the work, which is, of course, an enormously valuable thing for them.
Yeah.
So you then had, these 7 performances include also the cover performances, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And there were even smaller promotional things with piano and lecture demos, etc., where covers could also learn. I was very into program for young singers that learning to sing opera in concert form was, I think, something very valuable. And I think over the 50 years that I was doing this, I probably had over 1,000 singers that were came and went that had these experiences with the lecture demos and also on the stage, and also the mingling with a big star. That was a lot of importance for a lot of the singers to actually learn how to work with somebody like that.
Yes. Yes, and an incredibly valuable service rendered to those young singers to have them sing a role like this, sing excerpts, and as you say, mingle with the stars. There's no substitute for that kind of uh, formation of a singer, and sadly, we're losing much of it in these days. Perhaps we could turn now to the specific character of Adriano, who, as we said, is sung by a mezzo soprano, and this particular kind of performance, that is of a trouser role, a female singer singing a male role, by the time Wagner wrote this opera, had largely gone out of fashion in the Italian theater. In fact, perhaps one of the last roles in the Italian opera would be Linda di Chamonix with a trouser role. But we have in this case a very beautiful character, Adriano, the son of Rienzi, who sings a quite wonderful aria, Gerechter Gott. Can you describe the challenge of, it's not an easy aria, and can you perhaps discuss how you cast that role, how you dealt with transpositions if you needed them, that sort of thing?
Well, I always try to do the everything in the same key that the composer wrote. And so far, I have been fortunate, not only in Rienzi, but in my other operas, that because the composer wrote in a key and he had a picture in his mind of an oral picture of what color he wanted, what he was looking for, and I try to always find that. So I try to cast without the idea of changing any notes. Just that's what he wanted. I go to for an example. Uh, an opera by Meyerbeer that has for the tenor Les Huguenots. It has a high C sharp, a high D flat, and it's just a held note. It's not something that you can touch and then miss. And of course, they write opures for it. They write, if you can't do that, do that. But then I try to find somebody who can sing it that way. And so when you have somebody with the high D flat, that's when you do Les Huguenots. And so I couldn't do Rienzi like thinking about that specifically, but the part of Adriano is it's a beautiful person. It's a beautiful person who is the son of one of the nobles, but he is trying to move over to being a little bit more progressive, more liberal, and be a real citizen of Rome, as Rienzi's trying to get him to be. And so his aria, it doesn't go above an A. A is the highest note, but you have to be pretty comfortable up there in order to sing that. And there's a lot of energy because he's constantly undecided. Should I stay with my father, who is a noble, or should I go? And then there's, of course, he falls in love with Rienzi's sister, and there becomes the whole love thing. And so you need a mezzo. I need an Octavian. I need a Romeo um, uh, in Romeo and Juliet, in the Bellini Romeo and Juliet. That's what I looked for and hopefully found it.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's a very nice way for us to segue into the recording we're going to hear, or it's a recording of actually Marianne Stewart, who was your cover for the 2012 performance. This is Adriano's third act aria. It's Gerechter Gott, so ist's entschieden schon, just God, it has been decided. And in this aria, she bemoans the decision of the people to turn to an armed struggle with the nobles, and she asks the earth to open up and swallow her. She sings, "In my time of youth, my life withers." You will hear the indebtedness, I believe you'd agree with this, Maestro Queller, the indebtedness of Wagner to Bellini. There's a great deal of bel canto in this. And our performance today is, as I said, mezzo-soprano Marianne Stewart, who covered the role in 2012, accompanied by pianist Lyndon Meyer of the Tulsa Opera. This performance was recorded on April 5th, 2021. Let's have a listen. We just heard the aria Gerechter Gott from Rienzi. It's a beautiful aria, isn't it, Eve?
Oh, it's so beautiful. The relationship to Romeo's aria from the Cappella di Montecchi is something that touched me very much. It's that the arias are in the same key and run the same tempo, and the melody somehow is related in the very beginning of it.
Yes, yes, there are lots of ornaments or turns. You know, it really harkens back to an older.
Well, this aria, the way Wagner wrote it, has a beautiful cantilene with embellishments on it that he didn't usually write. It's special.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Let's move from Adriano then to the challenges of the title role, Rienzi. Perhaps you could talk a bit about casting that role and what it took for you to find a good Rienzi. It's not an easy role to cast. And perhaps who your favorite Rienzis were through the various years of your performances.
Well, I was looking around for Rienzi for one of my performances, and I was in Europe going to various performances, and I went to Munich Opera. It was one of the tenor Wagner operas. Is either Tannhäuser or Lohengrin, I'm just not sure. And I went backstage afterwards and congratulated Rainer Goldberg, and I asked him, how do you feel after singing 5 hours tonight? He said, I feel like I could do it again. And I said, Rienzi, this is what I want. This is what I want for Rienzi. So that's how I found that one. And I liked working with him very much. I actually think I brought him back for another concert, which was just Wagner excerpts, which I did the last, 30 minutes of each of the Ring Cycle operas. And I brought him back for the Siegfried.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yes. Well, he gives a very splendid accounting of the role in the 1992 recording.
Yeah.
Very exciting voice and a real true Wagnerian. The role is a difficult one to cast. It also is difficult because the famous prayer, which we're going to hear shortly, happens in Act 5 after a great deal of very heroic singing. So it's difficult.
It's difficult, but the introduction is so beautiful. The introduction is very romantic. Wagner put in a harp accompaniment for the introduction, and you hear it, and then the cello starts in the introduction of the main theme, and it's just, oh, it's breathtakingly beautiful that he
Yes.
has a chance to sing that. And I don't know if it's really difficult for him to sing after so much heavy singing, but it's not that high. It's in a nice, rich part of the voice. It doesn't, I don't think it ever gets to have to be fast and urgent anymore. I think he's come to what he knows is going to have to be.
A little bit more of a resignation there.
Resignation is a good word. Yeah.
Yes. Then let's move to our final musical selection, which is the very famous Prayer of Rienzi. Along with the overture, it's one of the few elements to have survived and entered the repertory at large. As I said, the opera opens Act 5, and Rienzi prays to God to hear him as he lies in the dust of defeat. We're going to hear tenor Jeremy Brauner in a performance with pianist Craig Ketter, which was recorded on April 17th. Let's have a listen.
Allmächt'ge Vater, blicke herab, hör mich im Staube zu dir fliehn, die Macht, die mir dein Wunder gab, lass jetzt noch nicht zugrunde gehen. Du stärktest mich, du gabst mir hohe Kraft, du lehrst mir erhabene Eigenschaft, zu hören den dir niedrig denkt, zu heben, was im Schaub versenkt. Du wandeltest des Volkes Schmach, so heut Glanz und Majestät. O liegt das Werk, das dir zum Preis errichtet steht. Ach, löse, Herr, die tiefe Nacht, die noch dir Menschenseelen deckt. Schenk uns den Abglanz deiner Macht, die Sieg in Ewigkeit erstreckt. Mein Herr und Vater, o blicke herab, senke dein Auge aus deinen Händen, mein Gott, dir hohe Kraft mir gab, erhöre mein tief in Brunstieg fliehn.
So that is indeed a quite beautiful moment, the prayer, as you mentioned, with its introduction and a harp and so forth. Let's move a bit to the composer Meyerbeer. Meyerbeer, of course, was very instrumental in the success of Rienzi. He spoke to a politician or nobleman about presenting the work in Dresden, and was quite instrumental in getting the work onto the boards. Could you talk a bit about your history with Meyerbeer and the operas you've conducted of Meyerbeer and how they relate to, and how they compare to, shall I say, the experience of performing Rienzi, a large opera by Wagner?
Well, we did. I wanted to do 4 Meyerbeer operas. I only got to do 3. And the first one was L'Africaine, and I did it in Italian the first time. And I knew the aria. I knew the main aria. As an accompanist, I played it occasionally for tenors. And when I was again an accompanist, I got to know. I was playing rehearsals for Friends of French Opera, and I played rehearsals for La Juive with Richard Tucker, and got to know him. And I also played rehearsals where Nikolai Gedda was in. I got to know him also. And I asked both of these gentlemen, I was just beginning to conduct. I have very little experience. Would you sing a concert opera with me in Carnegie Hall? And they both said yes. And so that was, and I had heard Richard sing O Paradiso. And I asked him if he would like to do that opera, if he'd like to learn the rest of it. And he said yes, and he did. And it was just a wonderful, it is a beautiful aria, but it's not just the aria. There's lots more that's really beautiful. And the orchestration, the instrumentation, Meyerbeer had that, it just had that thing that could capture you. And so I wanted to do more. And I finally did repeat L'Africaine, actually, in Richard Tucker's memory. Then I did Robert le Diable, which I did for Sam Raimi, because the principal character is a bass, and there's a lot of well, there's a lot there to talk about. There are two female leads in Robert le Diable. There also is a tenor, but he's not that important. I think the important one is this Diable guy. It's Robert le Diable, and then Les Huguenots. Les Huguenots is an opera you do if you have a tenor who has a high C sharp. And as I said, I think I said it already, I try to do the operas with the voice that I think the composer had in mind when he wrote the opera. And even if you are willing to have an oppure in there, because after all, for one C sharp, we can't not let this wonderful tenor sing it. But I try to have the voice that Meyerbeer had in mind in order to do the opera the way I think he would like me to do the opera. And so when I
should mention just briefly for our audience that oppure is an Italian word meaning either or. It's an alternate version with perhaps a lower note in it.
Thank you. When I found I was working quite a number of times with Marcello Giordani, as I said, and I decided to do this opera for him. And as I say, I mean, it's not that significant, but there is a D flat, C sharp as the conclusion of a very important duet. And he doesn't just touch it and come back. He has to hold it, and it's a cappella. There's no orchestra there, so there's like nothing you can do. You're just there, and Giordani just did it. He did it.
Is that the aria with the viola, plus blanche?
No, it's in a duet.
Oh, it's in a duet.
The D flat or C sharp. I mean, it's in a duet.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, that's even worse. It's not the aria, you know.
I see. And then, so you did Huguenot, Robert le Diable, Africaine, and
twice I did Les Huguenots. I did want to do one more, but I did not get to it. I couldn't find singers.
I see. And when you're, putting on, let's say, an opera like Meyerbeer as opposed to Rienzi, I mean, is it a similar difficulty of scale, the casting, the choruses, the length, the cuts? I mean, perhaps you could talk a little bit about the differences and similarities in performing the two.
Well, we have to keep the aria, the evening, we try to keep it to 3.5 hours at the worst, I mean, 3 hours is better. There are some Verdi operas that don't fit in there, there are lots of operas. There's some Mozart operas that don't fit in there,
Yes.
But that's having all these goals to try to satisfy, so that the audience wants to keep returning.
Yes. I should add a quote I thought very apt by Berlioz when he was talking about Meyerbeer. He said that Meyerbeer had the luck to be talented and the talent to be lucky, so that he was able to get his work performed. And of course, then we have the other operas in the Grand French tradition, Sicilian Vespers of Verdi. I believe you have done Sicilian Vespers, is that correct?
Yes, I have. Well, I've also conducted it in Barcelona, which was what made me want to bring it to New York. It was my debut. And
how about Don Carlos, the French version? Did you ever do that?
No, I didn't. I thought that was too close to Met repertoire for me to. I felt we needed to offer the audience. I know I did Tristan one time at Carnegie Hall, but the Met had not done it for 15 years, and so I thought maybe I could get my Tristan in there. But operas like Don Carlo, they were a little bit on borderline in that they are popular, known, and I shouldn't try to do that. You know, like there's so many others. There's so many I didn't get to that. You know, I did by count 100 operas at Carnegie Hall. I mean, and about 20 of them were repeats, so I maybe did 80 operas that repeated. And there were people writing to me all the time with composers I barely heard of and operas I didn't hear, suggesting that would be good.
Yes.
But there had to be something in it which would interest the public without too much writing about it. Either a particular singer who they would like to hear, who was willing to learn it or had done it in Europe. There had to be something. You cannot just take an unknown composer, an unknown opera, and unknown people and hope that the audience will be there. So making those decisions had a lot of opures in them.
Yes. Indeed. Well, yes. Well, you know, we've had a very illuminating discussion, I think, about Rienzi and about opera in general, especially about the complexities of performing a work of this scale. You know, you were so kind as to loan me a piano vocal score with many of your cuts and markings in them. And I can't imagine the amount of time it took to go through and simply write the cues in all the parts. I mean, that alone must have been a monumental task.
Well, I did that with all of the operas that I did, not only Rienzi, but yes, it is. There's a lot of note writing to write in, and a lot of times that it almost doesn't go right. You can fix it at the dress rehearsal. Just ask my assistant, oh, don't forget there has to be a B flat over there, you know. And a lot of the times that the orchestra players themselves, especially the wind players, are very helpful at listening. But it is a production. You have only so much rehearsal time, and actually, if you over rehearse it, it's not good either. It can get tired.
Overly controlled.
Well, or just yeah.
In a negative sense. Well, that is certainly a byword for all of us, not to be perfect about things. You know, I would certainly like to thank you, Maestro Eve Queller, for giving us an insider view of all that's involved in producing and performing these works. I would also like to thank Natalie Wagner, the Wagner Society president, and I'd like to thank the program committee of the Wagner Society of New York for the inspiration behind this program. With that, I'd like to give my best wishes to everyone concerned and to our viewership. Thank you.